I heard the scream and ran to the kitchen. The fridge was shaking, a faint cry coming from inside. I yanked the door open. My baby was there, cold and crying. And standing behind me was Karen, our HOA president, arms crossed, red jacket, that cruel smile. She broke the rules, she said. She thought I was just another neighbor. But what she didn't know, I'm the police chief. Before you hear what happened next, tell me where you were watching from. And don't forget to follow for more real HOA stories where justice always wins. The scream came from the kitchen, short and sharp, the kind that freezes your blood before your mind can even make sense of it. I dropped the mug in my hand, coffee spilling across the floor as I ran. My wife was already there, standing in front of the refrigerator, her hands trembling, her voice breaking as she cried out my name. "She's in there!" The words didn't make sense at first, but then I heard it, soft, muffled, and desperate, a tiny cry from inside the fridge. My heart stopped. I rushed forward, grabbed the handle, and yanked it open so hard the door slammed against the wall. Cold air hit my face, sharp and dry, and for a moment, everything slowed down. Inside, curled up against the shelves, was my baby girl. Her cheeks were pale, her small hands shaking as she reached toward me. Her lips quivered, her voice weak and cracked. "Daddy," she whispered. I pulled her out so fast I almost lost my balance, holding her against my chest, feeling how cold her skin was through her tiny pink pajamas. She was breathing, but her breath was shallow, her fingers gripping my shirt like she was afraid I might disappear. My wife fell to her knees beside me, crying, touching our daughter's face, whispering her name over and over. And then I saw her, standing just a few feet away near the doorway, arms crossed, expression calm and cold like none of this mattered. Karen, the HOA president, red jacket, blonde hair pinned back, clipboard in one hand. She wasn't panicking. She wasn't shocked. She was watching, like she had planned it all. I stared at her, my chest heaving, my daughter crying softly in my arms. "What did you do?" My voice cracked halfway through, somewhere between rage and disbelief. She didn't even flinch. She just tilted her head and said, "She broke the rules." The words were flat, like she was talking about trash bins or parking violations. "No children are allowed near the shared kitchen area. I've told you before." My wife looked up, tears streaking her face, voice trembling. "You locked her in a fridge. She's a baby." Karen's mouth curved slightly, not a smile but something close. "Maybe this will teach you to listen," she said. My mind couldn't process it. I just held my daughter closer, feeling the heat from her small body slowly return. The sound of her sobs tore through me. I wanted to scream, to break something, to shake Karen until she realized what she'd done. But I didn't. Years of training held me still. Every instinct I had from the force told me what this was. It wasn't an accident, it was control. It was punishment. I stood slowly, keeping my daughter pressed against me. Karen's confidence faltered for the first time as I stepped closer. My voice came out low, steady, colder than the air that still hung around us. "You locked a child in a refrigerator," I said. "You could have killed her." She blinked, her jaw tightening. "Don't be dramatic. I was protecting community property. You people never follow the rules." Her tone made my stomach turn. "Protecting property?" I repeated quietly. "She's a person, my daughter." My wife was still crying, whispering our child's name, trying to keep her calm. Karen sighed like she was tired of the conversation. "You can file a complaint with the board if you like," she said. "But I was enforcing the law. That was it." I pulled my phone from my pocket, my hands still shaking but my voice even. "Dispatch," I said, pressing the call button. "This is Chief Harrison. Send 2 units to 14 Ridgeview Court. Immediate response. Child endangerment, suspect on scene." Karen froze. "Chief?" she said slowly, her voice faltering for the first time. You're the police chief?" I met her eyes. "Yes." Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. "I didn't know," she stammered. I cut her off. "You didn't care." My voice rose, every word sharp enough to cut through the air. "You locked an innocent child in a fridge because you wanted control. Because you think your clipboard makes you powerful." She took a step back, her hands trembling now. "Wait," she said. "This isn't necessary. We can talk." "No," I said. "You lost your chance to talk the moment you turned that lock." The sound of sirens started in the distance, faint but growing. The color drained from her face. My wife looked up, still holding our baby, her tears mixing with relief now that help was coming. Karen tried to step forward, her voice trembling. "Please, I didn't mean to—" "Stop," I said sharply. "Don't take another step." The sirens grew louder, closer, bouncing off the houses down the street. Neighbors started peeking out from behind curtains, some stepping onto their porches, whispering to each other as the red and blue lights flashed across the lawns. Karen tried one more time, her voice desperate now. "You can't arrest me. I'm the HOA president." I stared at her. "And I'm the police chief," I said quietly. "You're done." The first patrol car stopped in front of the house, tires crunching on the driveway. The officers stepped out, their expressions hardening as they saw the scene. My wife clutching our baby, me standing by the fridge, Karen frozen by the door. One of them looked at me. "Chief?" I nodded. "Arrest her." Karen started shouting, her words tumbling out too fast to make sense. "You can't do this. I was following rules. I was protecting the neighborhood." The officer grabbed her wrist, turned her around, and the metallic click of handcuffs filled the air. She tried to pull away, but it was over. The sirens faded, replaced by the soft sound of my daughter breathing against my chest. My wife sat on the floor, holding our baby close, whispering, "It's okay. You're safe now. Mommy's here." The cold from the open fridge drifted through the room, mixing with the warmth of the sunlight pouring through the window. I stared at it for a long moment, the door still wide open, frost forming on the edges. That image would never leave me. My baby inside, the cold air, the stillness. I took one slow breath, then another, and turned toward the officers as they led Karen out of the house. "You can't hide behind rules anymore," I said quietly, mostly to myself. "Not after this." Outside, the neighbors watched silently as she was put in the back of the patrol car, still shouting, still denying, but no one believed her now. The red jacket that once made her look powerful looked small and foolish under the flashing lights. I stepped outside, holding my daughter, feeling her warmth against me. The morning air was crisp, the mountains in the distance glowing gold under the sun. I looked at my wife, who was standing beside me, tears still in her eyes, and said softly, "It's over." But deep down, I knew this was only the beginning of justice. The air inside the kitchen felt heavy, like the walls were holding their breath. My wife knelt beside me, her hands shaking as she wrapped a blanket around our daughter. The baby's small chest moved up and down in shallow gasps, her cheeks still pale, her eyes half closed. My wife whispered her name over and over, voice breaking each time. When she looked up, her face was streaked with tears and anger. "What did you do, Karen?" Karen stood by the doorway, completely still, the morning light glinting off the silver clip of her HOA badge. Her expression didn't soften, didn't flicker with guilt or fear. She actually looked annoyed. She was somewhere she shouldn't have been, she said flatly. "Rules exist for a reason. You people just ignore them until someone gets hurt." My wife's voice cracked. "She's 1 year old. You locked her in a fridge." Karen raised her chin. "You're exaggerating. I was keeping her safe until I could call the authorities. Maybe next time you'll supervise your child properly." I stood up slowly, still holding my daughter. Every part of me wanted to yell, to grab her by the shoulders and make her understand what she had done, but years of training held me steady. I spoke quietly, the kind of voice that made rookies listen. "You didn't protect her. You could have killed her." Karen's lips pressed into a thin line. She lifted her clipboard, tapping it like it was a weapon. "I was protecting community property. That refrigerator belongs to the HOA, and unsupervised children aren't allowed near it. It's written clearly in the handbook." "Protecting property?" I said. "You think the rules justify putting a baby in a box full of ice?" Her shoulders lifted in a careless shrug. "Maybe next time you'll follow directions." My wife let out a sob so raw it echoed. She pulled our daughter closer, whispering to her, then glared up at Karen. "You're sick." Karen took a step back, but her smirk didn't fade. "You can file a complaint," she said, her tone dripping with superiority. "It won't change the fact that you broke the rules. Maybe this will teach you to listen." That was enough. I shifted my daughter into my wife's arms and reached into my pocket for my phone. My voice dropped to that calm, commanding tone that used to cut through chaos on the job. "Dispatch," I said, "this is Chief Harrison." Send 2 units to 14 Ridgeview Court. Child endangerment in progress. Suspect on scene. The change in Karen was instant. Her mouth opened slightly, her confident posture cracking just a little. Chief? She repeated. Did you say you're the police chief? I nodded once. That's right. The color drained from her face. I didn't know, she stammered. I didn't mean, look, we can settle this. There's no need to involve the police. I took one step closer. You already did. Her eyes darted to the fridge, to my wife, to the crying baby, as if realizing too late what she'd done. You can't arrest me, she said quickly. I'm the HOA president. I was acting in my role. You abused it, I interrupted. And that makes it worse. The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of my daughter's quiet sobs. Karen's confidence flickered, but she straightened her back again, trying to hold on to what little power she had left. If you arrest me, you'll regret it, she said, voice shaking now. I have connections. I know people on the council. I know the law, I said, and that's all that matters here. Outside, faint sirens began to rise, a distant echo crawling up the street. My wife heard them and looked at me, relief and disbelief mixing in her eyes. Karen heard them too. She turned toward the window, her breathing quickening. You didn't have to do this, she whispered, panic creeping into her voice. Yes, I did, I said, because you don't learn any other way. The sirens grew louder. Flashing red and blue lights reflected against the glass cabinets, painting the walls in color. Karen stepped back until her heel hit the baseboard. Please, she said, her voice small now. I was just following rules. I didn't mean to hurt anyone. You didn't mean to, I said quietly. But you did. My wife rocked our daughter gently, whispering, It's okay, sweetheart, Daddy's here. The little one's fingers clutched the edge of her mother's shirt, her eyes half closed, exhausted from crying. A loud knock shook the door. Police! A voice called. Karen flinched. I walked over and opened it. 2 officers stepped in, their uniforms crisp, eyes scanning the room. They saw me first, then the baby, then Karen. One of them straightened immediately. Chief? I nodded toward Karen. She's the one. Karen backed up another step. No, this is a mistake, she said, her words tumbling out. I was just enforcing HOA regulations. The younger officer frowned. By putting a baby in a refrigerator? Her face twisted. You don't understand. The older officer moved forward, pulling a pair of handcuffs from his belt. Ma'am, you're under arrest for child endangerment and unlawful confinement. Turn around and place your hands behind your back. Karen shook her head, her voice cracking. You can't arrest me. I'm the HOA president. The officer's tone hardened. Ma'am, now. She hesitated just long enough for him to grab her wrist. The cuffs clicked shut, the sound loud in the cold air. Karen gasped, twisting to look at me. Please, she said, her voice almost pleading now. You're really doing this? Yes, I said simply. Justice isn't optional. The officers led her toward the door. She shouted something about unfair treatment, about lawyers and rules, but no one answered her. My wife sank down on the floor, cradling our daughter, whispering softly to calm her. I leaned against the counter, my pulse still pounding. The refrigerator door was still open, cold air spilling out. I reached over and shut it, the quiet click of the seal sounding like the end of something larger than just one moment. Outside, the patrol car door shut, and the sirens faded as they drove away. The house finally fell silent again, except for the soft sound of my baby's breathing. I crouched beside my wife, touching her shoulder gently. It's over, I said. She nodded, tears still running down her face. She's safe now. But as I looked toward the door, where the lights had disappeared down the street, I knew this wasn't the end. Justice had only just begun, and I would make sure it went all the way. The wail of sirens rolled through the neighborhood like thunder, echoing between the neat white fences and clean driveways of Ridgeview Court. Curtains twitched, doors creaked open, and neighbors began to gather in quiet clusters, eyes wide, phones already raised. The red and blue lights painted the perfect suburban street in flashes of chaos, the kind no one ever expected to see in a place that prided itself on being peaceful. I stood in the center of it all, my baby in my arms, wrapped tightly in a blanket. Her little body was still cold, her tiny fingers gripping the fabric. My wife was beside me, her face pale and streaked with tears, one hand pressed against our daughter's back. whispering to her even though she was too weak to answer. Karen stood a few feet away, arms still crossed, but her confidence was beginning to crack. Her hair was messy, her lipstick smudged, but she still clung to that clipboard like it could save her. The sirens grew louder until finally 2 police cruisers rounded the corner, tires crunching over the asphalt as they pulled up to the curb. The neighbors stepped back, murmuring, eyes bouncing between Karen and me, their perfect little bubble about to burst. 2 officers stepped out of the first car, hands resting on their belts. I knew them both, Lopez and Dawson. Good men. They froze when they saw me, their faces shifting from confusion to concern. Dawson spoke first, his tone cautious. "Chief, what's going on?" Before I could answer, Karen jumped in. Her voice was loud, almost desperate. "Officers, thank goodness you're here. This man and his wife are making false accusations. I was simply following HOA safety procedures. Their child was unsupervised." Lopez frowned, cutting her off. "Hold on. Did you say you locked a baby in a refrigerator?" Karen's eyes flickered, her voice faltering. It was only for a moment. She was in danger. I had to act quickly before something happened. "Something did happen," I said, my voice low. I turned to face her fully, holding my daughter close. "You trapped an infant in a sealed appliance." Her body temperature dropped. She could have died. Karen's fake composure slipped. "You can't prove..." Lopez took a step closer, his hand resting on his cuffs. "Ma'am, is that the refrigerator in question?" he asked, nodding toward the open kitchen door. "Yes," I said. "You'll find her fingerprints on the handle and the lock mechanism. I called it in before you arrived." Karen's face turned red. "You called this in? You can't do that." Dawson looked at me, realization dawning in his eyes. "Chief," he said slowly, "this is your case?" I nodded once. "She endangered my child." The air went still. Even the neighbors stopped whispering. Dawson's voice dropped to a whisper. "Sir, I'm sorry." I shook my head. "Don't be. Just do your job." Karen started backing up toward the fence. "This is ridiculous. You can't arrest me. I'm the HOA president." Lopez didn't blink. "That's not a legal position, ma'am. It doesn't give you authority over anyone's life." Her voice cracked. "You don't understand. I was protecting the neighborhood. The only person you need to protect yourself from," I said quietly, "is me." Lopez pulled out his cuffs, his tone calm but firm. "Ma'am, you're under arrest for child endangerment, unlawful confinement, and reckless behavior. Please turn around and place your hands behind your back." Karen froze. "You can't be serious." Dawson stepped forward, taking hold of her wrist. "You have the right to remain silent," he began, but Karen jerked away, shouting, "You're making a mistake. I didn't hurt her. This is all a setup." Lopez's patience broke. "Enough," he snapped. "Turn around." She tried to speak again, but Dawson grabbed her arm, guiding her toward the patrol car. The click of the handcuffs echoed across the yard. Karen stumbled once, her clipboard falling to the ground. The papers scattered, flipping in the wind like lost feathers. The neighbors stood in silence, their faces pale. Some had tears in their eyes, others just stared, shocked at the woman who'd ruled their lives with fines and threats was being led away in cuffs. Karen turned her head toward me, her voice shaking. "You'll regret this, Chief. I was only doing my duty." I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. My wife shifted beside me, holding our daughter closer. Her voice trembled. "She could have killed her," she whispered. "What kind of person does that?" "The kind who believes rules matter more than people," I said softly. Lopez came back a moment later, his notebook open. "We'll need to take statements," he said, his tone gentle now. "But she's not going anywhere." I nodded. "Thank you." He looked at my daughter, then back at me. "She's lucky you were here, sir." I glanced down at her small, sleeping face, her breathing shallow but steady. "No," I said quietly. "She's lucky we were both here." Lopez nodded and stepped away. The second cruiser pulled out, carrying Karen down the street, her red jacket flashing through the rear window until it disappeared. The sound of the siren faded slowly, swallowed by the stillness that followed. I walked to the edge of the driveway, looking up at the rows of perfect houses under the fading light. Every lawn trimmed, every mailbox polished, every family pretending everything was fine. But now, everyone had seen. Everyone knew. My wife came up beside me, her hand brushing against mine. "Is it over?" she asked softly. I looked at the horizon, where the sun was dipping behind the roofs. "Not yet," I said. "But it will be." Behind us, the refrigerator door stood slightly open, the cold air spilling out into the warm house. I walked back inside, pushed it shut, and stood there for a long time, my reflection staring back at me in the glossy white surface. The symbol of what she'd done, the proof that evil can hide behind rules, behind fake smiles, behind red jackets and HOA letters. But not anymore. Karen's reign was over. The neighborhood would remember her not as a leader, but as the woman who crossed a line too far. I held my daughter again that night as she slept, her tiny hand resting on my chest, her warmth slowly replacing the cold I'd felt all day. The house was quiet, except for her soft breathing. I closed my eyes and whispered the only promise that mattered. "It's over now. You're safe. And I'll never let anyone hurt you again." The days after the arrest blurred into one long stretch of flashing lights, interviews, and restless nights. Every time I closed my eyes, I could still hear the faint click of the refrigerator door. That sound became a trigger, the soft seal of cold air escaping. It made my wife shudder, made my daughter cry in her sleep, made me sit up at 2 a.m. staring into the dark. The quiet house didn't feel safe anymore. The walls held the echo of her scream, and the hum of the refrigerator felt alive, like it remembered what had happened inside it. The media didn't stop. The story spread like wildfire. HOA president arrested for locking baby in fridge. Those were the words I read every time I opened my phone. They were everywhere. Morning talk shows, online blogs, local radio. Everyone had an opinion, and every headline found new ways to turn our pain into a headline. News trucks parked at the end of our street, their satellite dishes pointed toward our home. I saw my face on screens in grocery stores, on social media, even on the evening news. I wasn't just the police chief anymore. I was the father whose baby had been locked in a fridge. Karen had a lawyer within hours of her arrest, a sharp-tongued man with perfect hair and a voice that sounded too smooth to trust. He stood outside the courthouse telling reporters that it had all been a tragic misunderstanding. He claimed Karen acted in the interest of neighborhood safety. He even said she had been concerned the child might hurt herself. Hearing that made my hands shake. My wife threw the remote at the TV, shouting, "She nearly killed her!" and broke down crying on the couch. But I didn't yell. I couldn't. I had seen this before. People like Karen always twisted the truth, always tried to hide their cruelty behind words like rules, order, and safety. But this time, she had crossed a line that couldn't be buried under legal excuses. We had evidence, too much of it. The detectives gathered fingerprints from the refrigerator door, from the lock, from the latch she had installed herself. The neighbors came forward one by one, their voices shaking, telling stories about the way she bullied them, the threats she made, the letters she left taped to their doors. One said she once fined them for having children's toys in their yard. Another admitted she'd been warned not to let her toddler run around without permission. One man had video footage, Karen dragging the fridge door shut while my wife screamed, and I had my own proof. My body cam, which I wore even when off duty, had caught the moments right after I opened the door. It recorded my wife's cries, my daughter's soft, broken sobs, Karen's cold voice saying, "Rules are rules." The footage spoke louder than any defense could. When the detectives reviewed it, their faces went pale. Still, my house didn't feel like home. My wife jumped whenever the doorbell rang. She started sleeping in the baby's room with the light on, whispering to her through the night. "You're safe, sweetheart. Mommy's here." I stayed awake in the hallway, watching through the half-open door, guarding them both. The badge on my nightstand wasn't just a symbol anymore. It was a promise. Reporters started calling my office, asking for statements. They wanted me to talk about justice, about how it felt to arrest someone from my own community. But this wasn't a story to me. It was personal. It was about my child's breath fogging up the glass of a fridge, about the look in her eyes when I pulled her out. Fear, confusion, trust. That look would never leave me. Karen's supporters, the ones who had always loved her control, tried to defend her online. They said she'd been pushed too far, that she was just strict. But for every one of them, there were 10 more who were finally brave enough to speak out. My inbox filled with messages from people in other towns, other HOAs, who said they had their own Karens, people who used rules to hurt others. Some even said they were inspired to file complaints against their boards. It made me realize something. This wasn't just about my daughter. It was about standing up to every person who thought power gave them permission to be cruel. When the court date was announced, the town buzzed with tension. Reporters swarmed the courthouse steps. Protesters held signs outside, some demanding justice, others defending her, shouting about rights and rules. I ignored them all. My focus stayed on my family that night. As I tucked my daughter into bed, she clung to my hand. Her voice was small, fragile. "Daddy, no cold," she said, shaking her head, her big brown eyes staring up at me. "No fridge." I swallowed hard and smiled softly. "No fridge, baby. Never again." My wife stood by the doorway, her eyes glassy, and whispered, "How can someone be so heartless?" I didn't have an answer. Maybe it wasn't about heartlessness. Maybe it was about something worse. Control. People like Karen didn't just want to be right. They wanted to own what was around them, every house, every lawn, every family. But control always ends the same way, in fear. And this time, she was the one who would feel it. As the days passed, the neighborhood slowly started to heal. The HOA board voted to remove her permanently. New letters were sent out apologizing for the actions of a former member. Neighbors who hadn't spoken to each other in years started talking again, checking in on us, bringing food, small gifts, apologies for not stepping in sooner. The same people who once feared her were now reclaiming their peace. And yet, I couldn't shake the image of that moment, her standing by the fridge, calm, smug, as if she were untouchable. I'd seen murderers with more remorse. Maybe that's what scared me the most. On the night before the trial, I stood alone in the kitchen, staring at the fridge. The hum was soft, steady. I pressed my hand against the door and closed my eyes. It was just an appliance again, nothing more. But to me, it would always be a reminder of how close we came to losing everything, and how far I'd go to make sure no one ever did something like that again. Outside, the world moved on. Inside, my family slept safely for the first time in weeks. I turned off the lights, looked once more at the badge sitting on the counter, and whispered to the empty room, "Justice is coming, Karen. And this time, it's not yours to twist." The courthouse was packed to the walls. Reporters filled the aisles with cameras in their laps. Sketch artists hunched over pads, and a low hum of whispers rolled through the air like a restless tide. Every seat was taken. Every eye turned to the front where Karen sat at the defense table. The red jacket that once made her look untouchable had been replaced by a dull gray jumpsuit. Her hair was unwashed, her expression hard, jaw clenched so tight it looked painful. The woman who used to strut through the neighborhood shouting about rules and order now looked small, fragile, stripped of her kingdom of clipboards and fear. My wife sat beside me in the front row, our daughter asleep in her arms. I could feel the tension in her body, the way she held our child like a shield between her and the world. Her eyes stayed fixed on the judge's bench, but her fingers kept moving, tracing the edge of the baby's blanket over and over, as if grounding herself in that small rhythm. The judge entered, a heavy silence falling across the courtroom. "This court will now come to order," he said, his deep voice echoing off the wooden panels. Karen's lawyer stood immediately, straightening his tie, putting on the kind of smile only lawyers can manage when they're cornered. "Your Honor," he began, "my client deeply regrets what happened. It was, at worst, a misunderstanding." The prosecutor rose before he could finish. "A misunderstanding?" she said, her voice steady but sharp. "Your client locked a 1-year-old child inside a refrigerator. A misunderstanding doesn't explain that. A misunderstanding doesn't excuse the fear in that child's eyes or the trauma this family will carry forever." The lawyer tried to interrupt, but she didn't stop. This wasn't a moment of confusion. This was control. This was cruelty disguised as community order. The judge nodded once. "Proceed." When they called my name, I stood. The room shifted slightly. Chairs creaked, pens paused, and for a moment, all I could hear was my own heartbeat. I walked to the stand, my boots heavy against the tile. I had testified in court hundreds of times before, but this was different. This wasn't duty. This was personal. I swore the oath, my hands steady even though my chest felt like it might break open. The prosecutor approached. "Chief Harrison," she said softly, "please describe what happened that morning. I drew in a breath. I heard my daughter scream, I said. I ran to the kitchen. The refrigerator was shaking. I opened it and she was inside, cold, crying, her lips turning blue. The words came slowly, one after another, each one cutting deeper than the last. Karen was standing there. She said it was a rule, that no children were allowed near the shared kitchen area. The courtroom was silent. Even the reporters had stopped writing. The sound of my voice filled the space, raw and steady. I'm a police officer, I continued. I've seen cruelty. I've seen violence. But I have never seen anything like that. Someone so calm while a baby cried for air. The prosecutor nodded gently. And what did you do next? I called it in, I said. I had her arrested. She didn't even try to deny it. She said she was enforcing community safety. Did she seem remorseful? I looked across the room at Karen. Her head was down, her fingers fidgeting with the edge of the table. No, I said quietly. She didn't look sorry. She looked annoyed that we weren't following her rules. The prosecutor's voice softened. Thank you, Chief. She turned to the judge. No further questions. Karen's lawyer stood quickly, his smile thin. Chief, he said, you've been through a lot. Would you say your emotions might have affected your memory of the events? I stared at him. You think I imagined finding my child locked in a fridge? He hesitated. Of course not, but stress can alter perception. Perception didn't put the lock on the door, I said. She did, the courtroom murmured. The lawyer cleared his throat, gave a small nod, and sat down. The judge leaned forward. Any other witnesses? The prosecutor called in 2 more, the detectives who processed the scene. They described fingerprints on the handle, the lock Karen had installed herself, the temperature inside the fridge when they arrived. Each detail was another nail in the coffin. By the time the last witness spoke, the room felt colder, heavier. Even Karen had stopped fidgeting. Her hands rested flat on the table now, her knuckles white. Finally, the judge turned to her. Mrs. Blake, he said, his voice measured. Do you wish to make a statement before sentencing? Karen stood slowly, her knees shaking slightly. When she spoke, her voice was small, uncertain. I didn't mean to hurt anyone, she said. I was just trying to keep things safe. The HOA rules exist for a reason. I thought I was doing the right thing. The judge's expression didn't change. Mrs. Blake, he said, order without compassion is not order, it's tyranny. You forgot that your power was meant to serve, not to harm. He lifted the papers in front of him, his eyes scanning them once more. The evidence is clear. This court finds you guilty on all counts: child endangerment, unlawful confinement, and reckless behavior. The gavel came down with a single sharp crack. The sound filled the room, final and absolute. Karen's shoulders slumped. The guards moved in, taking her by the arms. She didn't fight. She didn't shout this time, she just stared at the floor, her face pale, her eyes empty. I watched silently as they led her away. My wife held our daughter closer, tears rolling down her cheeks. I didn't cry. I just felt the weight lift from my chest, slow and heavy, replaced by something quieter. Relief. As Karen disappeared through the side door, the judge spoke one last time. Justice is not about punishment, he said, his tone calm, almost gentle. It's about balance. And today, balance has been restored. The courtroom emptied slowly. People whispered as they left, some shaking their heads, others wiping tears from their eyes. The reporters called out questions, but I didn't stop. I walked straight through the doors, the cold air outside hitting me like a wave. The sky was gray, the wind sharp. My wife came up beside me, slipping her hand into mine. It's over, she whispered. I looked down at our daughter's small face, sleeping against her mother's shoulder. Yeah, I said softly. It's finally over. But deep inside, I knew something else. Justice wasn't about ending something. It was about rebuilding what was broken. And that's what we would do next. The weeks after the trial felt like stepping out of a long storm and finding the world still standing. The air felt different, lighter somehow, but fragile, as if peace could break if we spoke too loudly. The neighborhood that had once been full of gossip and fear was quiet now. The white fences gleamed again in the sunlight. Kids' laughter returned to the streets, and for the first time in months, people smiled without looking over their shoulders. It wasn't perfect, but it was alive again. Karen's house sat empty at the end of the street. The once proud red shutters were faded, the HOA president's sign on her mailbox had been removed, and the lawn that she used to lecture everyone about was now wild with weeds. For years she had written fines to anyone whose grass was an inch too tall, but now her own home was falling apart, the perfect symbol of what she'd built and destroyed with her obsession for control. I passed it every morning on my way to work, and every time, I slowed down just a little, not out of revenge, but as a reminder of what happens when power becomes cruelty. At home, life found its rhythm again. My wife slowly stopped jumping at every sound. The nightmares came less often. The refrigerator, the one that had nearly taken everything from us, was gone. I had it hauled away the day after the verdict. In its place stood a new one, simple, white, nothing fancy. My wife wouldn't open it alone for weeks, but I understood. Healing doesn't come fast. Every click of a door can carry a memory. Our daughter grew stronger. The color returned to her cheeks, the sparkle to her eyes. Sometimes, when she laughed, the sound filled the whole house like sunlight. One afternoon, she toddled over to the spot in the kitchen where the old fridge once stood, patted the new one with her tiny hand, and said, "No cold." My wife smiled through tears and whispered, "No cold ever again." People in the neighborhood started to reach out. One by one, they came to the door, some with flowers, some with food, some just to say I'm sorry. They admitted they'd been afraid to stand up to Karen for years. They'd watched her bully people, fine families for small things, humiliate anyone who questioned her. "We thought she was untouchable," one neighbor said. "You proved she wasn't. I didn't feel like a hero. I didn't want to. I just wanted my family safe." But their words mattered. It reminded me why I became a police officer in the first place, not to punish, but to protect. On the day the news broke that Karen had been sentenced, 8 years in state prison, the town felt different. The wind blew softer, the streets quieter. For once, justice wasn't just a word people threw around. It was real. It had happened right here, in a place that used to believe people like her were above the law. That night, I stood in the backyard, the sky painted gold and pink by the setting sun. My wife came out carrying 2 cups of coffee. Our daughter played in the grass, her giggles mixing with the whisper of the wind through the trees. It was peaceful, that kind of peace that only comes after pain. "She's really gone," my wife said quietly, sitting beside me. "Yeah," I said, watching our daughter chase a butterfly, "and she's never coming back." We sat there for a while without speaking. The air smelled like pine and fresh-cut grass. Somewhere down the street, a dog barked, and a door closed softly. Normal sounds. The kind that used to go unnoticed but now felt precious. "Do you ever think she'll realize what she did?" my wife asked. I thought about it for a moment. "Maybe," I said, "but it doesn't matter anymore. What matters is that she can't hurt anyone else." My wife nodded, resting her head on my shoulder. The sky deepened into a warm orange glow, and the mountains on the horizon turned purple with dusk. Our daughter ran up to us, carrying a dandelion in her small hand. "For Mommy," she said proudly. My wife smiled and took it, her eyes glassy. "Thank you, baby." I looked at them, my entire world right there in front of me. The light touched their faces just right, and for the first time since that terrible day, I felt truly calm. The kind of calm that doesn't come from silence, but from safety. Later that night, after we put our daughter to bed, I stepped out onto the porch. The crickets sang in the grass, the cool air brushing against my face. I looked out over the neighborhood, the same one that had once been ruled by fear and fines. Now it was peaceful. Porch lights glowed softly. A couple walked their dog down the sidewalk, kids' bikes lay on lawns. Life was back. I took a deep breath, and for the first time in months, it didn't hurt. The badge sitting on the table beside me caught the moonlight. It wasn't just a job anymore. It was a vow. To protect, to serve, to make sure no one ever used power to harm the innocent again. Karen thought rules made her strong, but rules without heart destroy everything. She forgot that justice isn't about control, it's about compassion, and compassion is what always wins in the end. When I went back inside, my wife was asleep, our daughter curled against her side. I stood there for a long time, just watching them breathe. Safe, warm, whole. I kissed my wife's forehead and whispered, "It's over." The house creaked softly in reply, settling into the night. Outside, the moon climbed higher, silver light spilling across the quiet street. For once, Ridgeview Court felt like what it was supposed to be, a neighborhood, not a battlefield. Karen had tried to break us with fear, but fear doesn't last forever. Love does. And as the first stars blinked awake over the mountains, I finally believed what I had said in that courtroom. Justice isn't about revenge, it's about restoring what was taken. And in that moment, with my family safe and the night calm around us, I knew we had taken it back. Peace had come home again,